Welcome back everyone to Racing Reviews and welcome to Formula One Transfer Talk. Today we're talking about 2024 driver lineups. 10 teams on the grid next season, most of which already have their driver lineups confirmed. On the screen now are those confirmed contracts for next season, some of which can be broken. We know Formula One and the transfer merry-go-round, that is silly season. Contracts can be broken, performance clauses, or if they just fancy a change-up, things aren't as set in stone as they seem in Formula One. But actually next season, I don't think there's going to be a lot of movers and shakers. As always, if you are new, feel free to subscribe. But let's talk about it. We've got 10 teams, some of which are pretty much set in stone. And we'll start with those. We'll get those out of the way. And I think first up, the one team out of all of them that I think are in a really strong position going into next season, that's McLaren. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, two young drivers, two hungry drivers, two bloody quick drivers in the hands of those papaya cars, and there's no need to change them. Both drivers under contract for next season, and actually both of which deserve long-term contracts, and I don't see any reason from this season's performances why McLaren should want to change. So easy, they've got it sorted, no changes there. Similar story at Ferrari. Charles Leclerc, still, I believe, to be a generational talent. We've not seen it as much this season. It's been a tricky car to drive, but there have been flashes, there have been moments, that double pole position, if you want to call it that, in Baku being a standout moment, podium in Spa last time out. He's a quick driver. Carlos Sainz alongside him has been better this year in terms of consistency, doesn't quite have that star power that Charles Leclerc has, but is a quick number 2 driver in that car, and actually on his day gives Charles a really good run for his money and can be quicker than Leclerc. So both drivers out of contract at the end of next season. That's going to be fun. I think going into 2025, that's when Ferrari are going to have some conversations about who's in that car. But for now, or actually, and if the drivers want to move on themselves with the calamitous show that can be Ferrari strategy sometimes, but they're in a good position. No need to change for next season. Alpine, a team that actually I want to explore more in a future episode of Transfer Talk, because they are currently without a strong leadership structure within that team. No team principal as of recording, and it's just a bit all over the place. Lots of changes with Otmar out the door, as well as Alan Permain. It's a lot going on for a team that don't need it, in the sense of they need a bit of consistency. They've got that with their drivers for the first time in a very long time. They're sticking with the same driver pairing. But I just feel they're a team that are stagnating. They've got fun investors joining them. Michael B. Jordan, Ryan Reynolds have invested as minority shareholders so far this season. That's exciting, but that bit of pizzazz, that bit of showbiz is what the team is missing. So that'll be a fun one to explore in the future. But Gasly and Ocon behind the wheel, two young French drivers, two very solid drivers, Grand Prix winners in their own right, podium victors this season as well. They're not going to change for next season. Two more teams that have their drivers under contract, but these two I'm a little bit more sceptical going into next season. The first being Aston Martin, and the scepticism here isn't on the side of Fernando Alonso, who for once has actually made quite a good transfer decision in joining the Aston Martin project. No, it does come on the other side of the grid with Lance Stroll, and it's that consistency. The same question we have every single season. Can he get that consistency? Is it going to arrive? The flashes of brilliance haven't really been there this season either. He's got podiums in the past, a pole position. We've not seen that so far, and it's been Fernando who's been on top comfortably in 2023. The thing is with Stroll, and I think it's the saving grace for him, of course, his father's the team principal, or the team owner, I should say, and that counts for an awful lot when you're a Formula One driver. But actually, Stroll does have experience. He's quite quick. He's no slouch. He's lower half of the grid, but not the worst on our 2023 grid. I don't see who they'd replace him with. And actually, it would only be if we have a few movers and shakers lower down the grid, your likes of maybe Kevin Magnussen, hey, if Lewis Hamilton doesn't sign with Mercedes, Sergio Perez, if he gets dropped from Red Bull, maybe Daniel Ricciardo, and all of those choices, very, very slim pickings. Maybe Mick Schumacher could be a fun choice, but then that's a bit of a risk. And actually, Stroll right now is as good as, if not better, than Mick Schumacher. So Stroll, it's a safe choice, of course, but it does make the most sense for Aston Martin. I think that's another team that in 2025 may have a little bit more moving and shaking going on if Fernando decides to retire, and then they might consider whether they need to do a complete switch. Red Bull, the final team with 2 drivers that are under contract for next year. Max Verstappen is going nowhere, that's for sure. Looks like already at the summer break he has got that 3rd title well and truly wrapped up. But on the other side of the garage, Sergio Perez, what do we think? Some of you in my tier list video for mid-season prediction, or review I should say, said that I was a bit harsh on Sergio Perez because I gave his season a bad rating, put him in the bad category, which is actually the lowest on my scale. And some of you pointed out, and rightly so, that he is the only other winner in 2023. 2 victories at the start of the year, and in those first 4 rounds, definitely kept Max Verstappen honest. And I think it was really that race in Miami where Max started so far back and Checo was on pole. I think that race actually caused the most damage to Sergio Perez's confidence and overall performance, because Max romped that race, was charging all the way through. Checo should have won, and ever since then I don't feel Checo's been on that same level and has tried to catch up. If we have a second half of the season where Sergio can regain that confidence from the start of the year with a summer break and come back fighting with Max, then they don't need to replace him. If it's continuing that string of not making Q3 performances and actually being nowhere near winning Grand Prix, then question marks are asked. But again, a bit like Stroll, the question really is, if they do replace him, who are they replacing him with? Do they have anybody that can compete with Sergio Perez? Forget Max Verstappen, because that man is on another planet. But do they have someone ready to jump in that car and consistently beat Checo? I don't think so. Ricciardo, at the moment, is too much of a question mark. Ask me at the end of the season if he's been on fire at AlphaTauri, and if Sergio's been struggling at Red Bull, there's a chance. I think that's the most likely, or the only way, really, that Sergio loses his seat. Otherwise, Yuki Tsunoda, I think it's a risk. When Gasly went into that team, when Albon went into that team, yes, it was with less experience than Yuki has now, but both of them had done a solid enough job at Toro Rosso at the time. Yuki has done very well so far this year and actually deserves a bit of a shot if Sergio does have a poor end to 2023, but I still think unlikely. And then again, Hamilton, if he doesn't stay, unlikely. Magnussen, very unlikely. Alex Albon's been on fire, but I don't think you're taking him out of Williams, so I think Red Bull are staying the same. Let's go on to Williams, because I mentioned Albon. He's going nowhere. It's the other side of the garage for them, with Logan Sargent's contract running out at the end of this season. That's the big one at the moment, with Mick Schumacher taking a lot of the headlines as the driver that's gonna be coming in to replace him potentially next year. It's a risk, I think, for Williams. With Schumacher, of course, you've got that big name there. A name that is synonymous with Formula One. Mick was a Ferrari junior, no longer. It's part of the Mercedes team and the Mercedes program. Has got a couple of seasons of Formula One experience under his belt. Points finisher, which Logan Sargent hasn't. It's just whether they think Logan can be moulded to be a great driver. And so far, Logan Sargent's had an okay start to his Formula One career, but he is a rookie. He's in his first half of the season. It's not wowed anyone. It's not been on the level of Oscar Piastri, but I actually think compare it to 12 months ago and the season that Guan Yu Zhou had, it's not far off that. It's not far, and actually of late, I'd say the last 3 Grand Prix, Logan's been a lot closer to Alex Albon, and that's what he needs to do. And by the end of the year, if he can be even closer still, I don't see a reason to change. So my prediction for this team, kind of boringly, I'm afraid, is that they're going to stick with Albon and Logan Sargent for 2024. Another team that I think are going to stick with the same lineup is Mercedes. No surprise there. Russell, under contract, has not made a step backwards, but I think it's Lewis Hamilton has refound that bit of mojo that was missing at the start of last season, and he's really kicked on this year and has been pretty excellent in that other Mercedes, and I think he will sign a new contract for next season. Not done yet, and it wouldn't surprise me if it rumbled on for the rest of the year, because we know Lewis and Mercedes love a confusing and complex contract story and situation, but I think that will be done. And I think that'll be another unchanged lineup. A team, we've only got 3 left now, a team that I also think are going to stick with the same is indeed AlphaTauri. And this kind of has an asterisk in the sense that if Perez moves on, naturally it's going to be either Yuki or Daniel that I think are the best fit for that Red Bull drive. And I don't think it will be Perez that goes into the AlphaTauri. I think it will be Lawson or Iwasa. Most likely Lawson to be in that second seat, whoever it partners with. But my gut reaction is Yuki will stay there, and so will Daniel Ricciardo. And some of you may have caught my video on a rebrand for AlphaTauri, and I spoke about how if the team brought back Ricciardo, which since we published that he has, if they did bring him back, what a great opportunity to rebrand that team away from a sister team, away from a junior team, and into a team in its own right. And I think they will do that. I think they'll carry through that process. And so Yuki has gone from strength to strength this year. Ricciardo's a great teammate for him to learn from, but also to be a benchmark. And for Ricciardo, it's a place he knows well. He's comfortable within the team. Bit of a restructure, but they've got a Grand Prix winner there in Danny Rick, and someone who's very experienced, knows Formula One very well to help that restructure, and Laurent Mecchi coming in as the new team principal. So it works. It's a great lineup, actually, a strong one. I would maybe suggest the team's best ever lineup. I know there was Sainz and Verstappen, I think comes up as their next best, but they were very young in their career at that stage. So I think next year, if they keep Yuki and Ricciardo, that technically, with their experience, would be the team's best ever lineup. Would love to know your thoughts in the comments section on that one. And we've got 2 left. We've got my golden boys in Formula One. We'll do them last. And we've got Sauber, currently Alfa Romeo, going back to Sauber next year as it stands. Part of me feels like they could do some sort of deal for a couple of seasons, but then Audi are coming in 2026, so 2 seasons as Sauber gets the job done, doesn't it? Bottas is staying, but it does cost a lot of money, and is he really putting in the performances? It's okay, but I don't think he's wowed them as much as they would have hoped for, really. And I think next year might be his last in Formula One. So Bottas stays. I also think Joe stays. And I saw Matt and Tommy on P1 suggesting that maybe Théo Pourchaire will move into that team, who currently leads Formula 2. But it's just whether they can put that trust in him. He is still very young. If he comfortably wins F2 from here, I think that's the right thing to do. But it's been a tricky year for him, an up and down season. So if he does manage to pull it off, then there will be competition for his signature, because I think Haas will be lurking, maybe even AlphaTauri, maybe even Williams. I think there are suitors there for him. But if not, I think Joe has been improving consistently. I think gradually he is getting the edge over Bottas. It's close at the moment, but more often than not now is that lead Alfa Romeo car. And so I think they will stick next year with the same pairing. And I kind of think regardless whether Théo wins F2 or not, the amount of funding and backing that Joe brings, I think it would be silly to take him away from the team. So I'm going unchanged Alfa Romeo, and that leaves us with Haas. A team that it just never seems to go right for them, does it? It never seems to go right. But actually, in Nico Hülkenberg, they have got a very experienced and very quick driver, consistent driver. I think the best in the team's history. And this comes from a die-hard Grosjean fan. I think Hülkenberg has done the job this year, has really impressed me in that car, and has really, well, hung K-Mag out to dry, because Kevin has not had a great season, and actually it's his seat that's going to be under threat next year. But like I said for Stroll, like I said for Perez, it's the same story. Who is there to replace him? And actually, for a team like Haas, who tried 2 rookies, didn't go well, I don't see many suitors to replace Kevin Magnussen for next year. Again, I've spoken about that a few times. 2025, that's going to be a fun one, because there's going to be lots of movers and shakers there. Your top heavy drivers, I think, might be moving around, and Haas may be able to get a steal. I think the only hope for them is if AlphaTauri don't choose to keep Ricciardo. I think Ricciardo's got the bug back for Formula 1 again, and actually would join Haas alongside Hülkenberg if he didn't get a deal with Red Bull or AlphaTauri to stay on. Otherwise, and I think what's most likely to happen, is that they're going to stay the same. And so, somewhat boringly, which is not like me and is not like this channel in the slightest, I am going for a completely unchanged lineup for 2024. 2025, we'll make sure we do that one nice and early, because that will be fireworks in terms of a silly season. But the reason I think this summer is a bit dry and not many stories is because I think it's going to be exactly the same.